Let me share my screen. Just a moment. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Joshua. Can you guys see my screen right now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we will be talking about the Huawei Cloud Database, specifically RDS, for this technology enablement session, especially for Huawei Cloud Competition 2023. All right, so let's quickly start off. All right, so for this session, we will be having 4 main topics or chapters, which is first the introduction to databases. All right, and then is the RDS overview, the relational database service. And next, we will have examples or hands-on. So we will be guiding you, we'll be showing you how to create a RDS, okay, how to create a resource, how to create a database. And then lastly, we will have a Q&A session. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask during the Q&A session, okay? All right, so now we'll start off with the introduction to database. All right, so if you notice, we have a lot of types of databases. As you can see from this screen here, we have GaussDB, right? We have RDS, and we have DDS, Document Database Service. All right, so of course, from these three let's say GaussDB, we have many branches like GaussDB for Mongo, for SQL, for Redis. Okay, so same goes to RDS. We will have RDS for MySQL, for Postgres, for MariaDB. All right, and then we also have DDS. So DDS is actually a non-SQL database. It's a document database. So it's in JSON format, just like Mongo, in the same family with Mongo. Okay, so GaussDB is actually an enterprise level database from Huawei. So we will not talk about GaussDB as it is mainly for enterprise. So for us, we will mostly use on RDS for most of the time. So we will talk about RDS. Okay. So now, RDS overview. Okay, so like I mentioned previously, we have different variants of RDS for MySQL, Postgres SQL, or even MariaDB. All right, so for today's session, we will talk about MySQL. Okay, we will take MySQL, my RDS for MySQL as an example. Okay, so because MySQL is one of the world's most famous popular open source, okay, and it works well with different OS and web server. For example, the Linux, Apache, or Windows Microsoft Server, PHP, LAMP stack. All right, so we will take RDS for MySQL as an example. All right, so here we can quickly see a comparison of different cloud databases and other type of database. So you can see there are 3 types here, which is self-built and databases on cloud server and cloud databases. All right, so I think that most of us here will not be using the self-built database, right? Because it is very costly. You need to have buy a server, you need to have a physical server system. So for now, I don't think we will use self-built database for us. So I will just talk about databases on cloud server and cloud databases. So what are the difference of these two? All right, so databases on cloud server, it refers to when you have a cloud machine like a VM or ECS instance, or in AWS, it is EC2 instance, where you have cloud server, and then you install the database software in the server. So we call this as database on cloud server, right? You have a cloud server, and then you install the database onto the cloud server. So VS, the cloud database. So cloud database refers to RDS. So we don't buy a VM and install the database. We directly get the database. Okay, so for cloud databases, you see, you don't need to install any software or hardware, and you have low DBA costs. As if you using cloud servers, you will still need to have doing some manual things like scaling and all these things. So with cloud databases, everything is within it. It is inside it. Okay. So yeah, cloud database help user to reduce TCO, which is the total cost of ownership, and also OM, operation and maintenance workload. Right. So yeah, RDS is the cloud databases. All right. So now here I will quickly brief you through the RDS for MySQL features. Okay. So RDS for MySQL on Huawei Cloud. Okay, you can choose different types of version. You have MySQL 5.6, 5.7, or 8.0. Yeah, you can have different database types to choose. And then the security, okay, because the RDS will be built within an VPC, so you can have many security measures like security groups, subnets, VPN, SSL to protect the database. Right. So the database reliability is that you can have 3 copies of database storage, okay, up to 9. Okay, so this is the reliability. High availability, you can deploy it or within or across different availability zone. Okay, so DB instant access, you can access it via the EIP, the IP address, okay, or VPN. This DB instant management, yeah, you can manage the DB instant, you can add, delete, modify, or query, all through the Huawei cloud, okay? And then you can monitor the state of the DB, like the performance metrics, the usage, okay? Then the most important part is that you can do scaling, elastic scaling. So you can do horizontal scaling and vertical scaling using RDS. Backup and restoration, so you can have backup data, backup database, log management, okay? So this is the features. We just briefly go through the features, okay? All right, so this is the normal usage for the RDS, where you can see when you're trying to create an RDS on Huawei Cloud, you will be given a choice to create it as a primary standby database or a single database, okay? So for all of the images here are referring to the primary and standby database, all right? So for this primary and standby, okay, primary database, you can also have many replicas, okay, many replicas. So all these replicas are read-only replicas, okay? And then this standby, if the primary database breaks down or shut down, it will directly switch to standby database automatically. So you will have almost zero downtime for your application. Okay. So for replicas, it can only proceed with read requests for scaling. So for example, today, your website or your application have a lot of users, have 1 million users, 2 million users, okay, and they're coming to your website at the same time. So yeah, we can auto scaling it with the load balancing for the read request, redirect to here. So it won't make a heavy workload on your primary, okay? Okay, so next is the cloud database advantages. Okay, so like I said just now, instant availability. Later, I will show you on the hands-on session how to create this RDS database. And you can see that it's very fast. The moment you click, you create it, and it is there. You don't need to spend the time to set up or configure it. Like if today, if you bought a server, a virtual machine, and you need to install the operating system, the OS, DB software, MySQL, setup and configuration, it takes time. So the advantage of RDS is that it's instant available. You just create and it's there. Secondly, it's reliable, as we have the primary and standby architecture. If the primary DB fails, then automatically it will switch to standby, the standby DB. All right. Thirdly, it's easy to manage. Okay, you can see the metrics and the performance anytime. And lastly, scalable. Okay, you can have replicas. Okay, you can have load balancer, load balancing. So it's very scalable. You can scale it vertically or horizontally. No worries. Okay. All right. So here we come to the examples. Okay. For examples, we will have some example and also hands-on. Okay. So let's go through this basic system architecture. So you don't get confused by this image. You might see this image as very confusing or very complicated. You can see different services, different here, but don't worry. You can see these red boxes here, which I make these red boxes. This will be the only things that we'll look into. Okay, which is, you can see this is your website, your app. Okay, from the internet, people access it via public network, and then we have an ELB, which is the elastic load balancer. Okay, so from the ELB, okay, come into the AZ private. Okay, the ELB, we can distribute the traffic to different ECS. Okay, so ECS is the server instance where you host your codes. For example, your front end codes and your back end codes. So it's hosted on ECS. Maybe if today you are using Spring Boot MVC model, so yeah, the MVC model is in ECS. Okay, so the ELB will distribute the traffic, so you won't have any traffic spike or any downtime due to the workload is too heavy. Okay, so from the ECS, we can read data or write data from the MySQL. Okay, and this is the standby. So if this primary breakdowns or shutdown, rebooting, then automatically all these ECS will be redirected to standby. So you have zero downtime. Okay, so apart from this, like all these other things, we don't need to worry for this case as we will not be using it. Okay. So this ELB, it works with the AS, the auto scaling, to support horizontal and vertical scaling. Okay. Okay, so this is the basic system architect. So normally a system, if this is, we will have a ECS, where you hosted all your codes, and then a database, RDS. Okay, so sometimes people might ask, why do I need RDS? Because I already have an ECS instance. Why don't I directly install MySQL inside the ECS? So I don't need to have additional RDS, right? Of course, this is doable, but the bad part, the disadvantages is that when you do this, your database is within the ECS, then you cannot do any scaling or any replicas. If the database shut down, or not database, if the ECS is overloaded, and then your website, your application or website is gone. So it's better to separate it, which ECS is only handles the MVC models codes, and then the RDS, your database, is outside here. It's not within the ECS. All right. So now we will come to the hands-on. All right. So in this hands-on, I will show you how to locate RDS in Huawei Cloud Console. Okay. And also how to create an RDS. And also how to stop or freeze the RDS. Stop. So if, let's say, if you don't want to get charged so frequently, if when you are not using the RDS, then you can just stop it. Stop the RDS instance. Okay. And the last one is releasing RDS. So for example, if you are no longer need the RDS service, you can just release the RDS. Right. So now give me some moment. Let me share my screen on the hands-on. Okay. All right. So you can see here, this is our Huawei Cloud's website. Okay. You can just go simply Google Huawei Cloud, and then it will bring you to this website. Okay. So for this, how do you access RDS? Okay, of course, at first you need to log in into your Huawei accounts. Okay, so which I believe all of you already have an account, right? Because you need an account to register the competition. So after you log in into your Huawei account, you can see the console button here, which will brings you to Huawei Cloud Console. So you can just click onto it. Okay. All right. So once you get into this console, okay, you can see that here we have different regions. So it's better for you to choose the region that there is nearer to your real location. So the latency is low. Okay. And apart from this, you need to keep in mind that, let's say if you are using a Singapore region, okay. Let's say if you're using Singapore region, then make sure that all your resources is within the same region. So you won't have any problems on designing the system architecture later. Okay. So for example, if you want to access the RDS, you can click these three bars here, the hamburger bars. Okay, click it. And on the expanded view, you can just type in RDS. Okay, here you can see relation relational database service. So this is the RDS. All right. Okay, so you can see this is the RDS dashboard, as I already have an RDS running. So you can see all the running RDS here. Okay. Right now, I will show you how to create a RDS, the new RDS. Okay. You can just click the buy DB instance here. Okay, the red color here on the upper right side. You can just click the buy DB instance. Right, and it will redirect you to this page. Okay, you can see a lot of settings and configuration here. Don't worry, it is not as complicated as you see. Okay, so for most of the times, for short period projects, for example, these developer competitions, we don't need yearly or monthly subscription. We will be using pay-per-use, right, as it is a very short period. Okay, so pay-per-use. Yeah, so for the region, make sure that you are on the correct regions for the low network latency. Okay. So right here, you can have DB instance name. So this is just a naming for yourself to see, to identify the RDS. If you have multiple RDS running, and you can using this DB instance name to name it on your own preference, so that you can know what RDS is this used for. Okay, so don't worry, this DB instance name can be changed anytime, so you can just give it any name. So I can just name it as developer competition 2023. All right. So after that, we will have DB engine. Okay, so for DB engine is the database type. You have MySQL, PostgreSQL, and also MariaDB. Okay, so you can see we don't have MariaDB here because MariaDB is not available on Singapore. So you can just switch region to where the MariaDB exists. Okay, no worries. And later I will show you how to do that, how to know what region support what engines. Okay. So here, yeah, I can choose MySQL. Okay. And then you can choose the engine version. Do you want MySQL 5.6 or the latest 8.0? Okay, you can choose on your own preference. Okay, so the DB instance type, you can see here, we have two types. As I mentioned previously, we have primary standby or single. Okay, so for primary standby, we have a primary running and a standby there. For single, we don't have primary and standby. So for single, if this database is overloaded, it breaks down, then you need to wait it to reboot. You need to reboot it. You need to wait. So you will have some minimum downtime on your application. But no worries. So for primary and standby, you can see that below here we have primary AZ and standby AZ. Okay, which is the primary database availability zone. You want it in which zone, and for the standby in which zone. So for single one, you only have one database, so one RDS, so it will only have one. Okay. So for primary and standby, you can see there is mostly for production database in large and medium-sized enterprise. So you may choose single one for your projects, okay? Because it won't use as much as the primary standby. Okay, so you can see we have cloud SSD and extreme SSD. So Extreme SSD is just an intermediate version of the storage with a higher read-write speed. Okay. So after all these settings, so let's say today I want a single called SSD, availability zone. Okay, the time zone is the time, the database time. Okay, and search it according to your location, your geographic location. Okay, so after that, we will have the instance class. So this is the class of your database RDS server. So you can have different specification. Okay, so you can see there's a recommended connections. Okay, and this is the specification. So this is dedicated. So here, of course, you can also see the pricing directly under here with different specifications have their own different prices. Okay, so you can also choose general purpose, but yeah, it's not available right now. So mostly we can just use this one. And then after you choose your server instance, your specification, CPUs and memories, you can choose the storage space. So how big do you want for your RDS? Okay, so for this, you can just simply choose a size. Of course, don't worry if let's say in future, the limit, your size reach the limit, you can still increase it. So no worries. All right, so this encryption, anyone, you can disable or enable it according on your own preference. So VPC, choose your VPC, database port, just leave it as default. Okay, security group, which you can set up your security group on the inbound and outbound rules. Okay, so this is the password settings. Can configure it. The administrator username will be root and the password. So template, default, table name as your own preference. On enterprise project, most of you will not have this column here, as enterprise project is just for enterprise account. So I believe that most of you are having individual Huawei account, so you won't have this. So you don't need to choose anything here. You won't have this column to choose. Right, so I can just simply choose. So right after everything is done, then I can just click next. Okay, so after click next, it will create the DB, the RDS. So after you click next and completed, you have an RDS right here. Okay. Okay, so for this RDS, how to stop it? Let's say if I want to minimize my cost, maybe my application don't have any people using it during midnight. So I want to save cost, I want to shut it down during midnights. So yeah, how to shut it off? You can just click under the operation tab here, the more, click the more, okay? And then you can just click stop. Okay, when you click stop, it will stop the RDS. Okay, or if there's something wrong with your database, you can reboot it, restart it. Okay, so the same action is the same action if this RDS is already stopped and you need to start the RDS service back. Also click more and there will be a start button there. You can just click the start to start it. So let's say after you've done the project is ended, you no longer need this RDS, then you can just click delete. Okay, you can just click delete. Okay, and just click yes, and then it will delete the RDS instance. Okay. So this is for the RDS instance, and for the backups, you can also have many backups. This is the backups. Okay. And log reportings. From here, you can check the logs of the RDS. Okay. All right, so now let me guide you through the documentation. So if you have any problems on the RDS, you can actually find the solution through documentation, because the documentation is actually quite precise. It contains almost most of the commonly found questions and the solution for it. So you can just click RDS. So it depends on which product you are using. If you are using Postgres SQL, then you can just choose Postgres. So for this session, I'll be using MySQL. Okay, so after you come into here, you can just click documentations. All right. So here, it will also teach you how to set up if you forgotten the steps. Okay, you can see the user guide. Okay. So the important thing is the API. Okay, how to connect to your database via API. If you're interested, you can check here. Okay, and then for the FAQs, here. Okay, let's say if you already have a database, right, and you want to migrate the database to the RDS. So you can just click onto this. Okay. Yeah, I can see how to do the sorry, this is the connection. You can see how to do migration. So normally for migration, we will use the MySQL dump to migrate, okay, or use the pgdump tools for migration. And for some circumstances, you might also need to use OBS. If your MySQL dump is too large, then you will need to use OBS, where you upload your SQL dump to OBS, and then you do the migration with reference to your OBS. Okay. So here are the FAQs for different topics, which is very helpful. You can find almost most of the problems and the solution right in the FAQ sessions. All right. Okay, so now let's back to the console. So let's say, okay, for okay. So if you are worried about the RDS security, okay, maybe you are worried that someone outside or someone is able to access your RDS. So you can come into RDS, click the name, come into the RDS page, and then you can come to connectivity and security. All right. So here you can see your IP, okay, EIP. So if you wanted to access this database outside of the VPC, as this database is created within the VPC, you need to have an EIP. You need to bind an EIP, which is a public IP, towards this RDS. Then you are able to connect to this RDS from outside the VPC network. Okay. This is the private IP. This is the public IP. So you need to set up a public IP. All right. So as I mentioned just now, if you are worried about security, then you can set the security group rule here. Okay. So you can see the default is the protocol Let's say this one, it means that it allows TCP port 22 from all 0.0.0/0 is mean all IP. Okay, it means that it allows connection from all IPs using the TCP port 22. So if you are worried about the security, you can set the IP address of your computer only, so only your computer will be able to connect or access to this database or your server, right? All right, so this is the security. So databases, you can see this RDS inside, you can create database, just like MySQL, you can create database, okay? After create a database name, for example, I just see test. And then now I have a database, okay? And then you will be able to access this database in your code, okay? Authorized, no user, okay? So because I didn't set any accounts. So here you can create the database user, okay? We have different user with different access permission here. Okay, you can create the user for this database. So yeah, the host IP address, you can see this is the IP if you want to specify it. And then the database, which the permission is granted for this account, and the password. Okay, so this is where you create accounts for database. And logs, you can check the logs of the database here. So if there's any errors going on, you can just check here. So what is good about this is that because it is on Huawei cloud, so which means that you can access all these logs, all these settings whenever you have internet connection. Even though from mobile, you can have mobile browser like Safari or Google Chrome, you can access to Huawei Cloud Console and you can make settings, changes, or check the logs anytime and anywhere, as long as you have internet connection. So this is one of the advantage compared to if you are having cloud-based database inside a server, then it will be more trouble to check it when you are not on the computer. Right. So advanced OM is for advanced monitoring and maintenance. Okay. Right. So Cloud DBA is the database admin where you can manage your database. So you can execute SQL queries, commands directly on your database to test, just like, for example, the PHP admin, if you guys have tried it before. You can do queries, SQL query, you can insert table, delete table, update table using the DBA, the DAS, okay? All right, so these are the features and function of Huawei Cloud RDS. So now I will go back to the slides. Just a moment. All right. So actually, RDS is quite straightforward. It doesn't like AI, which you need to know how to collect data, how to process the data, everything. RDS is quite straightforward. It's just a database. So what you need to know is just how to create the database, how to connect to it, how to use it. Okay. So I think the next one will be Q&A session. Okay. So if you have any questions on database or RDS, you can ask in the chat box. Okay. Okay, I saw a question here. Okay, I'll answer your question later. Okay, so if you have any question, you can ask in the chat box, or if you are shy, or if you are you are watching this session via recordings in future, so you can also send your queries to this email, developer.cloudapex@huawei.com. Right. Okay, so now let's come to the chat box. Can we schedule the start stop of the RDS? Okay, just a moment, let me share you. Okay, let me see. Okay, you can schedule. It is doable, but you cannot directly set it on the RDS. Okay, the RDS is actually also accessible from using APIs. So yeah, let me share you the APIs related. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. Okay. So this is the RDS APIs. So you can see there are many things that you can do with the APIs. You can check the version, you can queries, you can create database, query, or do the settings, parameter configuration. So yes, for your questions is how can we schedule? Okay, you cannot schedule the start and stop directly with RDS, but you can do this by using ECS. Let's say because of course you will have an ECS, right, for the front end codes where you host all your codes, the front end and back end codes. So what you can do is that you can create a cron job on your server, create a cron job, and then on the cron job you can send API requests to start or stop. So you can set cron jobs on your server, and then in the cron jobs, you can send API requests to start or stop this RDS. So it is doable. You can schedule the start and stop with just some extra steps. Yeah. So yeah, you can refer to the API reference in the documentations on how to call the APIs, what parameter is needed, what authentication is needed, okay, and the constraints endpoints. So let me share you. Okay, from Huawei console, you can manually start and stop it. But if you want to schedule, it's better for you to do via the APIs. Let me share you the documents, okay? Okay, let me see if there's any related documents I can share with you. Okay, so any more questions? Let me check the chat. So, okay. All right, so if there's any questions, just type it into the chat box, or you can send us an email to the developer.huawei.com. All right. So seems like there is no question from the floor. So yeah, remember you can also fill in the training survey. Let's see.
Okay, this session we are ending. Thank you everyone
Okay,
joined this
so I will
session.
be here in this session until